What is going on, guys? Rogue TCG here, bringing the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG deck profile, and now this one was one that you all voted on, being Tenyi. And I wanted to do a little bit of a twist on Tenyi. I know y'all were expecting like Swordsoul and then Tenyi, but I really wanted the focus of this deck to be more on the Tenyi cards than on the Swordsoul cards, because there was a discussion in my Discord that I thought was very interesting, talking about how Tenyi is just a really cool strategy, and they're really disappointed to see it bogged down by like Swordsoul, like deck building principles. So I wanted to change that a little bit, just a little bit, because I know you are all seeing the Swordsoul cards in here, and that's because Swordsouls are just too good to not play in worm piles. However, we are playing a lot more Tenyi cards than we are Swordsoul cards, so I would consider this more of a Tenyi deck than a Swordsoul deck, and we're utilizing the Swordsouls as ways to keep playing and to make our end board a lot stronger. So that is enough yapping about the overall deck profile. Let's go through the card by card. Starting off, we're on triple copies of Tenyi Spirit Saruya. Not the other Saruya, this Saruya, the light one. If we control a worm monster or a face-up non-effect, we can special summon this card from our hand. If this card is sent to the graveyard for a worm Synchro summon, we can special summon a Tenyi Link monster from our extra deck, but it cannot be used as link material. Then you lose life points equal to the link rating of the monster we summoned times 1,000. Because each effect of Tenyi Spirit Saruya once per turn. Incredibly strong card. It's a freebie special summon. It's a way to play when our Sword Souls get interrupted because it is a tuner. And it will just cheat out a Tenyi Link. Typically, it's going to be Tenyi Spirit Sasahara, which is a link for, meaning we lose half our life points, but we get a free boss monster, not the end of the world. We're also on Tenyis of triple copies of Ashana. All the Tenyis will have this first effect. If we control no effect monsters, we can special summon this card from our hand. If we control a face-up non-effect monster, the second effect will have the same activation requirement, being controlling a face-up non-effect monster. We can banish this card from our hand or our graveyard to special summon a Tenyi monster from our deck, except for Ashana, and then we're locked for the rest of the turn, except for worm monsters. We're also on triple copies of Vashada, same special summoning condition. If we control no effect monsters, we can special summon from our hand. And if we control a face-up non-effect, we can banish it from our hand or graveyard to target a card our opponent controls and bounce it to their hand. Double copies of Adhara, same summoning condition. If it's in our graveyard, we control a face-up non-effect, we can banish it from our graveyard, target a banished worm monster, except for this card, and add it to our hand. And then we're on one copy of Sathana and one copy of Mapura, same summoning conditions, but these have trigger effects instead of ignition effects, where if this card's in our hand or graveyard, and then a non-effect we control is destroy a battle or card effect, we can banish it from our hand or graveyard, target one of those destroyed monsters, summon it, and then destroy a monster our opponent controls non-targeting. And then Mapura reads, if a face-up non-effect monster we control is targeted with a card effect, we can banish it from our hand or graveyard, negate the activation, and destroy the card that is activated. For other Tenyi cards, we're on one Flawless Perfection of the Tenyi. All non-effects on the field are unaffected by monster effects. Once per turn, if our opponent special summons an effect monster while you control a face-down card, or a non-effect monster, we're able to draw 2 cards, which is fantastic. We're also on one copy of Heavenly Dragon Circle, tribute a worm, add a worm from our deck to our hand, or if we tributed a non-effect, we can special summon the card that we would have been adding to our hand instead, but its effects are negated. And then during the main phase, if we control a face-up non-effect monster, we can banish this card from our graveyard to add a Tenyi card from our deck to our hand, but we can only use one of those effects per turn and only once per turn. We're on double copies of Vessel of the Dragon Cycle, sending a worm from our deck to the graveyard. Then if we control a face-up non-effect, we can add from our deck to our hand a Tenyi monster with a different name than the card that we sent to the graveyard. Now, you can read this card, right? I'm also reading this card right along with you. This card's Foolish Burial, and then if we have the Tenyi thing, just having a non-effect monster, it's also a Rhoda. It's Foolish plus Rhoda. This card is insane. We're also on 2 copies of the new card being Tenyi Infinity. When this card is activated, we can add a Vessel or a Heavenly Dragon Circle from our deck to our hand, so this or this, and we can tribute a worm monster, target a monster on the field, and destroy it, and we can only use that effect of Tenyi Infinity once per turn, and then once per turn during end phase, we can send this card to the graveyard, and if we do, place a Flawless Perfection of the Tenyi from our deck or graveyard face up in our field zone, we can only activate 1 Tenyi Infinity per turn. We're on 2 copies of Tenyi Infinity for the reason that we're going to be activating 1 during our first turn. During the end phase, we're going to be translating it into a Flawless Perfection, and then later on our opponent's turn, since our Heavenly Dragon Circle can search a Tenyi card, theoretically, we would be able to, in theory, search the second copy of Tenyi Infinity, or if we go to the Link Monster, we can search it that way, place it over our Flawless Perfection, and then during the end step, be able to replace that Flawless Perfection from the graveyard to our field. incredibly strong interaction with all of our spells. For our Sword Souls, we're on triple copies of Moye. If it's normal or special, we can reveal a Sword Soul or any worm monster in our hand to special summon a Sword Soul token. When the token is in the monster zone, the player who summoned it cannot special summon from the extra deck except for Synchro monsters. If this card is sent to the graveyard as Sync material, we can draw a card. Triple copies of a Longguan. We can discard a Sword Soul or another worm to special summon this card from our hand and then make a token. While that token's on the field, blah blah blah, we can only Synchro summon. And then if this card is sent to the graveyard as Synchro material, we can inflict 1200 damage to our opponent, and that is time in the round. And our last Sword Soul is one copy of Taya. When it's on field, we can banish a Sword Soul or a worm from our graveyard to summon the token, and if this card is sent to the graveyard as Synchro material, we can send a Sword Soul card or any worm from our deck to the graveyard. And that is a once per turn. We're also on triple copies of Sword Soul Emergence, either adding a Sword Soul monster from our deck to our hand, or if we control a Synchro monster at point of activation, we can add a worm monster instead. If this card is banished, we can target a Sword Soul monster or a worm monster we control, increase or decrease its level by 1 until the end of the turn, which isn't really too useful in this strategy specifically, although it can allow us to do cheeky plays with Yazi just by using only our Sword Souls. For our non-engine, we're on triple copies of Ash Blossom, triple copies of Fualas, double copies of Perulia, and triple copies of Infinite Impermanence. In our extra deck, for our non-effects, we're on triple copies of Monk of the Tenyi. That's all of the non-effect monsters we're playing. We're not playing Berserker, unfortunately. One copy of Shaman needs two worm monsters, allowing us to pitch a card, target a worm in our graveyard, special summon it. But for the rest of the turn, we cannot activate effects of monsters special summon from the extra deck, except for Tenyi monsters specifically, which is quite a big restriction, given that even though we are a Tenyi deck, we do have a lot of different archetypes in our extra deck. When an attack is declared involving a face-up non-effect monster, we can target a card our opponent controls and pop it. We're also on one copy of Draco Masters of the Tenyi, needs 2+ monsters, including a Link monster, cannot be destroyed in battle with an effect monster. If we control no other effect monsters, we can destroy an effect monster our opponent controls, up to the number of non-effect monsters we control, and in our graveyard. We will use this effect of Draco Masters of the Tenyi once per turn. Typically, this card's going to be able to pop 1 or 2 cards, although in the best case scenarios, it's going to be able to pop 3 cards non-targeting, which is amazing. We're also on double copies of Sasahara. It needs 2+ worms. When you control a face-up non-effect monster, monsters your opponent controls cannot target effect monsters for attacks. They cannot target effect monsters on field with card effects. Quick effect, we can target an effect monster our opponent controls, special summon a Tenyi Spirit token equal to the stats of that monster's original attack, and that is a once per turn. Really, really fantastic card. Protects our whole board from targeting effects except for our non-effect monsters, in which case our Flawless Perfection will protect them at least from monster effects. And then also it generates its own tokens and uses the stats of our opponent's cards, meaning they're going to have to functionally crash if we choose their largest monster. But that's it for our links. Now let's cover our synchros. We're on double copies of Wula at Hara. Needs a tuner and a non-tuner. If it's synchro summoned and 2 or more worms are in our graveyard or banishment, we can add a field spell from our deck to our hand. That is any field spell, although we're not playing janky stuff like Secret Village of the Spellcasters. Typically, this is just going to be adding Tenyi Infinity. This also reads, while a face-up non-effect monster is face-up on the field, this card gains these effects. It cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, and your opponent cannot target with card effects, making it quite sticky, which is kind of a theme with our extra deck, being this card can't be destroyed by a battle with an effect monster. This card allows our cards to be not targeted, and then this card protects itself, which is really, really fantastic when you put them all together. We're also on Sword Souls of Yugioh on Synchro, allowing us to add to our hand or banish a Sword Soul from our deck. And then quick effect, we can banish a Sword Soul or a worm monster from our hand or graveyard, target another effect monster on field, and negate its effects until the end of the turn, although we can only use one of those effects per turn. One copy of Big Chungus. For each banished card, this card gains some stats, and monsters your opponent controls lose those stats. If this card be destroyed by card effect, we can banish a card from our graveyard instead. And if a card is banished, except for during the damage step, we can banish a card from our opponent's field and their graveyard, and that is a once per turn. That is a non-targeting banish, which is incredibly powerful, which is one of the main reasons why we're actually not including SP Little Knight in this list, even though it's pretty much a must-play staple for almost any strategy. We're also on one copy of Evil Longguan. If this card is synchro summoned, if you synchro summon another worm while this card is face up on the field, we can draw a card. If your opponent special summons a monster, except during the damage step, we can banish one of those monsters, and if we do, inflict 1200 to their opponent. When our opponent activates a spell or trap card or an effect, quick effect, we can banish this card, and if we do, inflict 1200 to our opponent. You can see how that damage is going to add up really, really quick. So Longguan, 1200. They special summon a monster, 1200. They activate a spell trap, 1200. That is quite a lot of damage. That's 3,600 immediately. That's almost half their life points. We're also on one copy of Yazi, Evil of the Yang Xing. Our opponent cannot target this card on field with card effects. You can use each of the effect of Yazi once per turn. We can target Yang Xing we control and a card our opponent controls to destroy both. When this card is destroy a battle or card effect, we can special summon a worm from our deck in defense position. We're also on one copy of Boxia, Brightness of the Yang Xing. When this card is Synchro Summon, we can target cards on the field up to the number of different original attributes of wyrms used for the Synchro Summon of this card, and shuffle those cards back into the deck. Once per turn, we can target one card we control and one level 4 or lower monster in our graveyard, destroy the card that we targeted, and if we do, special summon the level 4 from our graveyard. Incredibly powerful effects, and if this extra deck wasn't super tight, as it is, we could, in theory, play a second copy of Boxia just to make going second a lot easier. But that's going to be about it for the deck profile. Thank you all so much for watching, if you still are, and I'm going to be seeing you all later. Bye-bye. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you wanted to talk to more Yu-Gi-Oh! Players like yourself, I would highly recommend checking out our Discord server. Link is going to be in the description, as well as the QR code on screen. We do talk somewhat frequently about Yu-Gi-Oh! And the current meta, so I would really enjoy to see you there. As well as we do recently now have channel memberships available on our YouTube channel, where we have 3 different tiers. We have Super Supporter at $2 a month, where you get loyalty badges, emojis, guaranteed comment responses, a shout out at the end of every video, as well as access to the members only Discord channel, where you get early sneak peeks at future videos. There is the Giga Supporter at $5 a month, where you have early access to all new videos about a day or two before they go up, as well as all the previous offers. And for $15 a month, we do have our final tier, which is going to be Femboy Fanatic. You get a guaranteed customized video every single month, as well as 1 hour of my time. Could be for anything you'd like. You want a duel? Absolutely. You want me to help build a deck? Absolutely. You want to play some Helldivers? Sure. I'll do anything for an hour once a month. But supporting does help me out quite a lot, and it does help me produce all of these videos. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be seeing y'all later. Bye-bye.